I was standing in my father's hospital room when I realized I'd married my half-sister. The envelope from Dr. Lewis felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my hands. Harrison Blake, Chicago real estate mogul, my ex-father-in-law, the man whose life I'd saved with my kidney, had been dead for 3 days. And now his doctor was handing me a letter that would explain why a small-town Pennsylvania mechanic was a perfect donor match for a man he supposedly shared no blood with. My name is Alex Reynolds. I'm 35 years old, and 7 months ago, my wife Emma divorced me. Her lawyers called me a fortune hunter, a scheming opportunist who'd wormed his way into a $50 million family by playing hero. They took my house, my savings, even my grandfather's tools. Left me with nothing but a 12-year-old van and a surgical scar where my kidney used to be. The man I saved, the man who'd thanked me in his hospital bed, who'd played poker with me during recovery, who'd told me we were family, had called me a con artist 2 days before filing for divorce. Harrison Blake had exposed my scheme to his daughter and her uncle, then changed his will to cut me out completely. And now he was dead. I looked at Dr. Lewis standing in his office doorway. "What's in this?" "I don't know the details," he said quietly. "But Harrison made me promise to give it to you personally. He said to tell you, my daughter never knew the truth. I should have driven back to Pennsylvania right then. Should have thrown the envelope away and let the past stay buried. But I sat in my van in the hospital parking lot and broke the seal. The first thing I saw was Harrison's handwriting. Sharp and decisive, just like the man himself. Then I saw the paternity test results underneath. The world stopped at I met Emma Blake 3 years earlier at a county agricultural fair outside Chicago, back when I was just Alex Reynolds, the mechanic who fixed generators and lived in a 2-bedroom house in Pennsylvania with my mother Elizabeth. The fair was one of those fall festivals where people came for pumpkin pie contests and hay rides, and I'd been called in because the main power generator had blown a circuit and shut down half the carnival rides. I was under the machine in my oil-stained work coveralls, tracing the fault in the wiring, when I heard a voice above me. "This is definitely more interesting than the pie contest." I rolled out from under the generator and looked up. Standing there in an elegant dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, with rings on her fingers that could have paid off my van, was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She was squatting down in designer heels, genuinely curious about the tools spread out around me. "Alex Reynolds," I said, wiping my greasy hand on my pants before extending it. "Reynolds Auto Repair." "Emma Wilson," she replied, shaking my hand without flinching at the grease. "My father owns this farm." That should have been my first warning. Harrison Blake didn't just own the fairgrounds. He owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago and had a net worth that Forbes estimated at $50 million. But Emma didn't mention any of that. Instead, she asked about my work, how I learned the trade, what brought me all the way from Pennsylvania to Illinois. We talked for 25 minutes while festival guests waited for the lights to come back on. I told her about learning mechanics from my grandfather, about taking over his small repair shop after he died, about the satisfaction of fixing things that seemed broken beyond repair. She told me about working at a modern art gallery in Chicago, about her love for old comedy series, about her fear that everyone who got close to her only saw dollar signs. "You know what's funny?" she said, watching me reconnect the final wire. "Most guys I meet spend the whole conversation trying to impress me with what they have or what they know. You haven't once tried to sell yourself." "I'm a mechanic from Pennsylvania," I said with a laugh. "What would I sell? My collection of socket wrenches." I got the generator running, but Emma found me in the parking lot an hour later with a glass of cider she'd smuggled out from the VIP tent. We sat on the hood of my beat-up van and talked until 3 in the morning, watching the festival lights dim one by one. She told me about growing up with tutors and boarding schools, about feeling like she was always being evaluated, always being tested to see if she measured up to her father's expectations. I told her about my mother working double shifts at the factory to put me through tech college, about building my business from scratch, about the pride of earning something rather than inheriting it. "You know what I like about you, Alex?" Emma said as the sun started to rise over the fairgrounds. "You haven't asked about money once. You haven't asked about my family or what they do or what I'm worth. You just asked about me." We dated long distance for 6 months before she convinced me to move to suburban Chicago. She'd drive to Pennsylvania on weekends, showing up at my shop in expensive cars that looked absurd parked between rusted pickups and work vans. My neighbors would peek through their windows, wondering what a woman like that wanted with a guy like me. "She's using you," my friend Tom said one night at the bar. "Rich girls don't marry mechanics unless there's an angle." But Emma wasn't like that. She'd help me in the shop, getting grease under her perfect nails, laughing when I taught her the difference between a torque wrench and a socket wrench. She'd bring takeout and we'd eat sitting on my workbench, talking about everything and nothing. 6 months in, she said, "Move to Chicago. Open a shop there. I want you closer." "Emma, I can't compete with Chicago mechanics. They've got fancy equipment, corporate backing. You've got something they don't," she interrupted. "You care about the work more than the profit. People can tell the difference." So I moved, found a small garage space in a working-class suburb 40 minutes from Emma's downtown apartment, kept my prices fair, worked long hours, built a reputation for honest service in a city full of dealers who saw customers as marks. Emma and I got serious fast. Within a year, we were talking marriage, talking about a future. But there was one obstacle I couldn't fix with a wrench and determination. Her father, Harrison Blake. Emma put off introducing us for as long as she could. She'd make excuses. He was traveling, he was busy, he was dealing with business issues. Finally, on her 28th birthday, she admitted the truth. "Dad doesn't trust anyone," she said, "especially the men I date. He thinks everyone's after the family money. He's going to be horrible to you, Alex. And I'm sorry in advance." We met at her birthday dinner at an upscale lakeside restaurant on Lake Michigan. Harrison Blake sat at the head of the table like a king holding court, and the moment I walked in, his eyes locked onto me with the same look my customers gave a suspicious oil leak, like something was wrong and needed to be fixed. He grilled me through the entire meal. What did I do? Where did I come from? What were my finances? My family background? Every answer I gave seemed to confirm his worst suspicions. When I mentioned my mother was a retired factory worker, he actually smirked. "How convenient that you found Emma." I bit back my anger and kept my voice level. "With respect, Mr. Blake, I didn't find Emma. She found me." After dinner, he pulled me aside while Emma was in the restroom, whiskey sharp on his breath. "Alex," he said, his voice low and cold, "I built an empire from nothing, started with a single property and turned it into $50 million. You know how I did that? By recognizing ambition and spotting opportunists. You might have fooled my daughter with your humble mechanic routine, but I see exactly what you are. Men like you think you've hit the jackpot when you meet a girl like Emma. But I'm watching you. The moment you show your true colors, the moment you slip up, you're gone." I looked Harrison Blake in the eye and kept my voice steady. "With all due respect, Mr. Blake, I don't want your money. I want your daughter." He laughed, a sound without any warmth in it. "They all say that at first. My mother Elizabeth had her own concerns when I told her about the engagement, but she voiced them more gently. We were sitting at her kitchen table in Pennsylvania, the same table where she'd helped me with homework as a kid, where we'd celebrated every birthday with homemade cake because that's all we could afford. "Alex," she said, stirring her tea slowly, "when you marry into that kind of wealth, you become the outsider forever. You'll always be under suspicion, always being tested, always having to prove yourself. Are you prepared for that?" "I love Emma, Mom. That's all that matters." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "Then keep your integrity, son. Work hard. Never give them a reason to think you're what they assume you are. Your father would have said the same thing." My father died in a construction accident when I was 3 years old. Mom rarely talked about him. The loss was too painful even decades later. But whenever she mentioned him, it was always with that same advice. Keep your integrity, work hard, prove them wrong. So that's exactly what I did. For 3 years of marriage, I became a man on a mission to show Harrison Blake that not everyone had a price. When Harrison offered to buy us a luxury apartment in downtown Chicago with a view of the lake, I politely but firmly declined. Emma and I found a modest house in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but something we could afford on my salary alone. The neighborhood had young families, kids playing in yards, people who worked normal jobs and drove normal cars. When Harrison suggested investing in my repair shop to help you expand, reach your potential, I thanked him and said no. I appreciate it, but I need to build this myself. If it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, I want to know it was my work that made it happen. Emma understood, even though I know it frustrated her sometimes. You don't have to prove anything to him, she'd say. Yes, I do. Until he sees I'm not what he thinks I am. I kept driving my 12-year-old van to family dinners where the parking lot looked like a luxury car dealership. Lexuses, Cadillacs, Mercedes, and my van with its dented bumper and rust spots. Harrison's brothers Kevin and Roy would smirk when I pulled up, exchanging looks that said everything. There's the mechanic who married into money. I paid for our groceries, our utilities, our date nights, even though Emma's weekly allowance from the family trust exceeded my entire monthly income. She offered to contribute, said it was silly for me to struggle when she had access to more money than we could spend in a lifetime. It's not about the money, I explained. It's about showing your father that I can provide for you, that I married you because I love you, not because of what your family has. For 3 years, that was my life, working 60-hour weeks at the shop, taking every job I could get, building a reputation for honest service in a suburb that appreciated a mechanic who didn't try to upsell unnecessary repairs. I'd come home exhausted, grease under my fingernails, my back aching from crawling under cars all day. Emma would be waiting with dinner, takeout usually, since neither of us could cook worth anything, and we'd sit at our secondhand kitchen table and talk about our day. She'd tell me about the gallery, about the pretentious artists who thought their work was genius, about the customers with more money than taste. I'd tell her about the cars I'd fixed, the customers I'd helped, the satisfaction of solving problems that seemed impossible. We should start thinking about kids, Emma said one night, about 2.5 years into our marriage. I want a family with you, Alex. Something that's ours. We talked about it for hours that night. What kind of parents we wanted to be, how we'd raise them differently than we were raised. Emma wanted to make sure our kids understood the value of hard work, didn't grow up spoiled and entitled. I wanted to make sure they knew they were loved, that they had a father who was present and involved. We started trying. We talked about converting the spare bedroom into a nursery, about names we liked, about whether my mother would move closer to help with babysitting. Elizabeth was getting older, still living in Pennsylvania in the same small house where I'd grown up. The idea of having her nearby, of our kids knowing their grandmother the way I knew her, felt right. A house we bought with your salary, Emma said one night, looking around our modest living room. A family we build together, not with my father's money. You've really done it, Alex. You've proven you're not what he thinks. But I should have known that men like Harrison Blake don't change their minds easily. The 3 years I spent proving myself, working myself to exhaustion, keeping my integrity intact, all of it was about to mean nothing, because Harrison Blake was about to collapse at a business meeting, and everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change forever. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was under a Chevy Silverado in my suburban garage, replacing a worn transmission. My hands were covered in oil, and when I saw Emma's name flashing on my phone, I almost didn't answer. We usually talked in the evenings, not during work hours. Alex. Her voice was breaking, barely coherent through sobs. It's Dad. He collapsed at a meeting. They're taking him to Chicago Medical Center right now. I wiped my hands and told my assistant to close up the shop. 20 minutes later, I was on the highway driving into the city, my heart pounding. Whatever Harrison Blake thought of me, he was Emma's father. And Emma was my world. The ICU waiting room at Chicago Medical Center was filled with the Blake family when I arrived. Harrison's brothers, Kevin and Roy, sat in expensive suits looking grim. Emma was pacing near the window, her face pale and streaked with tears. When she saw me, she collapsed into my arms. They're running tests, she whispered. But the doctors say it's bad, Alex. Really bad. Dr. Lewis, the head cardiologist, came out an hour later with results that would change everything. Mr. Blake has severe heart failure. Both valves are damaged beyond repair. Without a transplant, we're looking at 7, maybe 8 months at most. The room went silent. Emma's hand tightened around mine so hard I felt my bones shift. What are his options? Kevin asked, always the pragmatic one. We'll put him on the transplant list immediately, Dr. Lewis explained. But given his age and condition, I need you to be realistic. The waiting list is long, and priority goes to younger patients with better prognosis. I looked through the window into Harrison's room. He was lying there connected to machines, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. The man who'd spent 3 years calling me a gold digger, who'd grilled me at every family dinner, who'd made it clear I would never be good enough for his daughter. He looked human for the first time. Over the next few days, the family lined up for compatibility testing. Emma went first, hopeful and determined. I'm his daughter, she said confidently. We'll match. But she didn't. The blood work came back negative, not even close to compatible. Kevin and Roy tested next. Both successful businessmen in their own right, though they'd always lived in Harrison's shadow. Neither of them matched either. This isn't uncommon, Dr. Lewis tried to reassure us. Even among immediate family, finding a compatible donor is rare. The odds are about 1 in 4 for siblings, and even lower for children. We'll keep Mr. Blake on the transplant list and hope for the best. That night, lying in bed next to Emma, I made a decision that would destroy my life. I didn't tell her. The next morning, I drove to the medical center before my shift at the shop and asked to be tested. The technician looked at me skeptically. Are you family? Father-in-law, I said. She sighed sympathetically. That's very generous, but you should know the odds of compatibility between non-relatives are extremely slim. We're talking less than 1%. Test me anyway. For days later, Dr. Lewis called me. Mr. Reynolds, I need you to come to my office. Alone. The results are unusual. I sat across from him an hour later while he spread papers across his desk, shaking his head in what looked like disbelief. Alex, I've been practicing medicine for 25 years, he said slowly. What I'm looking at here shouldn't be possible. Your compatibility with Harrison Blake is perfect. Not just good, perfect. Your tissue markers, antibodies, blood type, everything matches better than most siblings. Better than some identical twins. I stared at the numbers on the page, not understanding what they meant. How is that possible? Honestly, I don't know. This level of compatibility between non-relatives is essentially unheard of. It's like you were made to be his donor. He paused. You could save Harrison's life, Alex, but you need to understand what you're committing to. This is major surgery. Long recovery time. Possible complications. And given your relationship with Mr. Blake, given how he's treated you, are you absolutely sure about this? I thought about Emma crying in my arms, about the fear in her eyes when she talked about losing her father, about the life we were building together, the family we wanted to create. I'm sure, I said. He's Emma's father. That makes him family. I told Emma that evening in our kitchen, the kitchen I'd remodeled myself to save money. She cycled through shock, disbelief, confusion. You tested without telling me? Her voice rose. And you're a perfect match? Alex, how is that even possible? Dr. Lewis says sometimes it just happens. A fluke of genetics. A fluke. She stepped back, studying my face like she was seeing me for the first time. My father spent 3 years convinced you're after our money. And now you just happen to be the perfect donor to save his life. The doubt in her voice cut deeper than any of Harrison's insults ever had. Emma, I'm doing this because I love you, because you love him. That's it. But I could see something had changed in her eyes. A seed of suspicion that Harrison had planted years ago was starting to sprout. The family meeting was tense and awkward. Harrison sat at the head of the conference table in his hospital room, looking weak but still commanding. When Dr. Lewis explained that I was a perfect match, Kevin and Roy exchanged glances. No, Harrison said flatly. I won't accept it. I won't owe you anything, Alex. I won't give you that leverage over this family. It's not leverage, I insisted, keeping my voice calm. It's saving your life. Kevin surprised me by speaking up. Come on, Harrison. The guy's trying to help. But Harrison's face was hard. The guy wants to buy a permanent spot in the will with a kidney. He wants insurance that no matter what I think of him, he's untouchable. My mother Elizabeth was my only real confidant through all of this. When I told her what I planned to do, she gripped my hand across her kitchen table. Alex, a kidney is forever. Once you give it, you can't take it back. Make absolutely sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Not for approval from a man who might never give it. I'm doing it for Emma, Mom. Just Emma. She nodded slowly. Your father would have been proud. He always said family shows up for family, no matter what. The morning of the surgery, Emma was silent. She'd barely spoken to me for the 3 days since Harrison had reluctantly agreed to the procedure. You don't have to do this, she finally said as they prepped me for surgery. Dad's been horrible to you for years. He called you a schemer, accused you of chasing money. Why would you save someone who never respected you? I squeezed her hand. Because family shows up for family. That's what your dad needs to learn about me. They wheeled me into the operating room at Chicago Medical Center, and the last thing I remembered before the anesthesia took hold was Dr. Lewis's voice. We're going to take good care of you, Alex. The surgery lasted 7 hours. They removed my kidney through a laparoscopic procedure. Minimally invasive. The doctors had promised, but when I woke up in recovery, the pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It felt like someone had reached into my side and torn out a piece of me, which wasn't far from the truth. Dr. Lewis came to check on me in the recovery room, exhaustion evident on his face. The surgery was a complete success, he said, squeezing my shoulder. Your kidney started functioning in Harrison's body immediately. Perfect compatibility wasn't just on paper, it was real. You saved his life, Alex. I was discharged after 4 days, moving gingerly and with strict instructions about rest and recovery. Harrison stayed for 10 days, monitored closely as his body accepted the new organ. The doctors called it miraculous, no rejection, no complications, just a kidney working as if it had always belonged there. During those weeks of recovery, something unexpected happened. Harrison changed. He started asking me to visit his hospital room. We'd play poker with a deck one of the nurses brought, betting with spare change and laughing when either of us won. He asked about my business, about growing up in Pennsylvania, about my plans for the future. He told me stories about building his empire from nothing, about the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd hurt along the way. You know what I regret most? He said one afternoon, staring out the window at Lake Michigan. The secrets I kept out of pride. The lies I told to protect my reputation. It's never too late to make things right, I said, thinking he was talking about business deals or family disputes. He turned to look at me, and something flickered in his eyes. Pain, guilt, something deeper I couldn't identify. Some things can't be fixed, Alex. They can only be softened, made less painful for the people who come after. I didn't understand what he meant then. I wish I had asked more questions. Emma visited daily during my recovery, but I noticed the change immediately. She came less frequently as the weeks went on. She was always on her phone, always rushing off to meetings or appointments. When I tried to hold her hand, she'd flinch slightly, pulling away as if my touch burned her. Everything okay? I asked one evening. Fine, she said, not meeting my eyes. Just busy with work. But I knew her tells. The way she avoided eye contact. The way she hid her phone screen whenever I walked into the room. The way she tensed when I touched her. Something was wrong, and it was eating away at our marriage. A year after the surgery, not 3 weeks as I'd written in the prompt, but a full year of Harrison recovering slowly and me trying to rebuild my strength. I came home from a follow-up checkup to find 3 cars parked in our driveway. Kevin's Audi, a stranger's silver Porsche, Emma's Jeep. I walked into our living room to find what could only be described as a tribunal. Emma sat on our couch, her face cold and distant. Kevin lounged in my favorite chair like he owned it. And a man in an expensive suit stood by the window with a leather folder under his arm. Alex, Emma said, her voice flat and emotionless. We need to talk. The man in the suit stepped forward, extending his hand without warmth. I'm Benjamin Crow from Crow and Partners. I represent Mrs. Reynolds in a legal capacity. I didn't shake his hand. What is this? Kevin leaned forward, a smug smile on his face. Sit down, Alex. Your little game is over. What game? Emma stood, her hands clenched at her sides. I'm filing for divorce. Immediately, the world tilted. The surgical scar on my side throbbed. A year after I gave your father my kidney? Are you serious right now? Don't play the victim, Kevin snapped. Harrison told us everything. About how you manipulated your way into this family. How you used the donation to worm your way into the will. Harrison. I looked at Emma, searching for any sign of the woman I'd married. Harrison thanked me. He told me we were family. He played poker with me in his hospital room. He was being polite, Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. But he called us 2 days ago. Told us the truth about what you really are. Benjamin Crow opened his folder and pulled out documents. My client is seeking an immediate divorce, equitable division of assets, and given the circumstances of manipulation and undue influence, forfeiture of any claims to the Blake family estate. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. I saved her father's life. You tried to buy your way into $50 million, Kevin said, standing up. Harrison waited until after he recovered to expose you because he didn't want to give you the satisfaction of backing out and playing martyr. Emma's eyes were red but dry. A perfect match, Alex? For a man you share no blood with? How convenient for a mechanic from Pennsylvania who happened to fall in love with a rich girl. You think I faked medical tests? My voice rose. You think I manipulated genetics? Crow stepped between us. Sign the papers, Mr. Reynolds. Walk away quietly, or we make sure everyone knows what you are. A con artist who preyed on a vulnerable family during a medical crisis. I sank into a chair, feeling the stitches in my side pull. I need to talk to Harrison, face to face. He's the one who exposed you, Kevin said, gathering his things. The will's already been changed. You get nothing, not a cent, not even gratitude. They left the papers on our coffee table and walked out. Emma was the last to leave. She paused at the door, looking back at me one final time. I wanted to believe you were different, she whispered. I really did. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the house we'd bought together, sitting next to the surgical scar that proved I'd given everything for a family that thought I was nothing but a thief. The divorce was brutal and methodical, designed to destroy not just my marriage but my entire life. Emma's lawyers, led by Benjamin Crow, who I later learned was her college boyfriend, painted me as a calculated predator who had stalked a wealthy young woman at a county fair. They presented my refusal of Harrison's gifts as evidence of a long-term plan to appear humble and trustworthy. Every act of independence, every time I'd insisted on paying my own way, was twisted into proof of manipulation. Mr. Reynolds deliberately created a false persona, Crow argued in court. He positioned himself as a simple mechanic with integrity, rejecting family assistance to build credibility. Then, when the opportunity arose, he exploited a medical crisis to secure his position in the Blake family permanently. My lawyer, a public defender I could barely afford, tried to fight back. My client donated a kidney to save a man's life. How is that manipulation? Perfect donor compatibility between non-relatives is statistically improbable, Crow countered smoothly. We believe Mr. Reynolds had access to Mr. Blake's medical records through his wife and specifically sought testing knowing he would match. The kidney wasn't a gift. It was an investment with an expected return of $50 million. The accusations were absurd, but they worked. The judge looked at me, a mechanic in a borrowed suit sitting across from a team of high-powered attorneys, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. They took everything. The house Emma and I had bought together, the one I'd insisted on purchasing with my own mortgage, went to her. My savings account, every dollar I'd earned through 60-hour weeks and honest labor, was split, with most going to cover emotional damages. Even my grandfather's tools, the ones I'd inherited when he died, were seized as marital assets to be liquidated and divided. I was left with my van, the clothes I'd packed in garbage bags, and a surgical scar that throbbed every time I moved wrong. Harrison never appeared in court. His lawyers submitted a statement saying he was too disgusted by Mr. Reynolds' betrayal to face him in person. The man who'd held my hand after surgery, who'd told me we were family, had decided I was nothing but a con artist who'd bought his way into the will with a kidney. I tried calling him dozens of times. Every call went to voicemail. I drove to his office building in downtown Chicago, but security wouldn't let me past the lobby. I wrote letters that were returned unopened. The will was changed within weeks of the divorce filing. Harrison's lawyers made sure the press knew. Due to recent revelations about manipulation and undue influence, Harrison Blake has revised his estate plan to protect his family from opportunistic individuals. I moved back to Pennsylvania, back to my childhood bedroom in my mother's small house. The room still had posters from my teenage years, a twin bed that was too short for my adult frame, and a window that looked out at the factory where my mother had worked for 30 years. Elizabeth didn't ask questions. She just held me while I cried for the first time since I was a child, and then she made me tea and said, "You did the right thing, Alex. Sometimes doing the right thing costs us everything." I took small repair jobs when my body allowed it. Oil changes, brake replacements, nothing that required heavy lifting or long hours on my feet. The surgery had taken more out of me than I'd admitted. Some days the pain in my side was so intense I could barely stand. Other days I felt like I was functioning at half capacity, missing a piece of myself that I could never get back. 7 months crawled by. I was starting to rebuild in small ways. A few regular customers, enough money for rent if I moved out of Mom's house, the beginning of something that might eventually feel like a life again. Then my phone rang with an unknown Chicago number. "Mr. Reynolds?" The voice was familiar but exhausted. "This is Dr. Lewis from Chicago Medical Center. I'm calling about Harrison Blake." My chest tightened. "Is he rejecting the kidney?" There was a long pause. "No. Harrison passed away yesterday. Heart attack. The kidney you donated worked perfectly until the very end." I sat down on my mother's porch steps, surprised by the grief that washed over me. Despite everything he'd done, Harrison Blake had been Emma's father, and for a few weeks after the surgery he'd felt like something close to family. "Does Emma know?" I asked quietly. "The family has been notified," Dr. Lewis said, "but Harrison left something specifically for you. He insisted I deliver it personally. Can you come to the medical center? I don't think I'm welcome in Chicago anymore." "Alex," Dr. Lewis said, his voice firm, "Harrison made me promise. He said to tell you, my daughter never knew the truth." Those words, the same ones that had been on the envelope in the original prompt, sent ice through my veins. The next morning, I drove my beat-up van back to Chicago for the first time since the divorce. The city looked different now. No longer the place where I'd built a life with Emma, but a battlefield where I'd lost everything. Dr. Lewis met me in his office, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He handed me a thick manila envelope, sealed with wax like something from another century. "I don't know what's in here," he said. "Harrison gave it to me 6 months ago with strict instructions to deliver it to you after his death. He made me swear I wouldn't open it." I held the envelope, feeling the weight of whatever secrets were inside. "Before you open that," Dr. Lewis added quietly, "you should know something. When I ran your compatibility tests before the surgery, the results were so unusual that I ran them twice. Then I ran a third panel that Harrison specifically requested. He knew something, Alex, and whatever's in that envelope is what he knew." I waited until I was back in my van, parked in the hospital lot with Lake Michigan visible in the distance. Then I broke the seal and pulled out Harrison Blake's final confession. The letter was written in Harrison's distinctive handwriting. Sharp, decisive strokes that matched the man himself. My hands trembled as I began to read. "Alex, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you've lost everything. I'm sorry. I'm a coward who chose reputation over his son." The word son hit me like a fist to the chest. "The kidney donation revealed a secret I've kept for 40 years, Harrison's letter continued. "You weren't a perfect match by chance. You're my biological son. Before I met Emma's mother, I had an affair with a nurse named Elizabeth Reynolds. Your mother, She never told me she was pregnant. She moved to Pennsylvania and disappeared from my life, and I never knew you existed until those compatibility tests came back. Couldn't breathe. The parking lot spun around me. My mother, Elizabeth, the woman who'd raised me alone, who'd worked factory shifts to put me through school, who'd told me my father died in a construction accident when I was 3. Perfect donor compatibility doesn't happen between strangers, Harrison wrote. Dr. Lewis ran a secret paternity test to be certain. The results were conclusive. You share 50% of my DNA. Emma is your half-sister. The words on the page blurred. Emma, my wife, my half-sister. I couldn't reveal the truth, the letter continued. If I told anyone, it would destroy Emma. She'd learn she married her own brother. Your life would be ruined. Your mother's reputation would be destroyed after decades of keeping this secret. So I made a choice. I lied. I called you a gold digger and pushed for the divorce. I ruined your life with a lie to save Emma from learning a much worse truth. My surgical scar throbbed. I'd given my kidney to my own father. I'd married my own half-sister. We'd planned to have children together. The enclosed documents transfer 40% of my estate to you, $20 million, as my eldest son. Harrison's letter concluded. Emma will receive 60%. She'll contest it, but the DNA evidence is sealed and ironclad. My lawyers will handle everything discreetly. I was a coward who abandoned you once and destroyed you a second time to protect my daughter. You deserved better. Your mother is a better person than I ever was. Don't tell Emma unless absolutely necessary. Let her hate you for the lie rather than learn she married her brother. Some truths don't free people, they destroy them. Your father, Harrison Blake. I sat in that parking lot for 3 hours, reading and rereading the letter. Then I drove to Pennsylvania and walked into my mother's kitchen, where she was making tea. She saw my face and the mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. He told you, she whispered.